Hey, greetings and salutations, everybody. John here, and I am sitting here with writer, producer, Academy Award winner, Diablo Cody. Diablo, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I actually cannot begin to tell you how excited I was. First of all, for the movie, and then finding out I was going to have a chance to meet and talk with you, because you're one of the few people I've never had a chance to meet.
I know, and I'm very glad to meet you too.
Yeah, I'm super stoked. And actually, let's start with the basics on this. For a lot of people, we have Ricki and the Flash opening up August 7th. For people who don't know much about the film yet, just tell us a little bit about Ricki and the Flash.
Ricki and the Flash is the story of Ricki, played by Meryl Streep, who is a woman who always aspired to be a rock star and who didn't quite pull it off, but is still sort of following her dream of being a musician and is still out there playing rock and roll and is very passionate about music. However, her adult children are somewhat estranged from her because they feel that she chose her musical ambitions over them when they were growing up.
Right.
And so it's about her trying to mend that relationship.
You know, when we look at specifically your other films, and especially if we're going to look at films like Juno, Young Adults, things like that, you have this great way of a lot of filmmakers with some great success focus on the action. Some like to focus on, what the circumstances are or some elemental piece of the puzzle. You always seem to really focus on characters. You really always draw our attention to the people. You make them the focal point. Why is that important to you, and why do you think that worked so well in a movie like Ricki and the Flash?
Well, I do definitely like to write character-driven things, and I think in a way it's what I've defaulted to because it's the only thing I'm good at. I don't know if I could write one of those amazing plots that are full of twists and turns.
Right.
If I could, maybe I should give it a try. But no, in my case, I'm just fascinated with human nature, and I'm fascinated with how. And I don't really, obviously I believe in good and evil, but I think most people are somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And I think that ambiguity and that gray area is so interesting to explore.
When I was watching the film, one of the things that really stood out to me was it felt like such an intimate film. It felt like a very close movie from the aspects of the family, but also in terms of scale, it felt very, very intimate. And I just love that. As a writer, I have to imagine you have 10, 20, or 30 different ideas pop into your head every day. Where did Ricki and the Flash come from, and why? What was it about the idea for this film that made you go, I want to follow this one through?
I had to laugh because I wish I had 10, 20, or 30 ideas popping into my head a day. I'd be much more productive. For me, I really wanted to tell this story because I have kids now, and I have found myself thinking about how are they going to perceive me when they get older. Are they gonna admire the fact that I had this kind of weird Hollywood career? Are they gonna think that's cool? Are they gonna resent me for having been passionate about something, while they were growing up, and sometimes being away from them as a result? So this was kind of a meditation on that. And I also I really wanted to tell a story about, a woman of a certain age,
right,
who was still rocking out and maybe a little bit selfish, because I don't think we see that very often.
Right. Well, hey, listen, I could sit here and ask you a million questions all day, but our fans have a bunch of questions they've wanted to ask you. So we took to Twitter and we asked you guys if you had any questions, and you sent in a whole ton, and we picked out a couple. So let's bring up the first one here. The first one comes from Oliver Sharp, who wrote, what was your reaction when you heard Meryl Streep was going to be in your film?
It was one of the most surreal and ecstatic days of my life. I was actually out to dinner with her, and I had thought that the purpose of the dinner was to convince her to do the film.
Right.
And she started talking about her schedule very casually, okay, if we're going to do this, we would have to start in October. And I thought to myself, oh, this is actually happening. She's doing it. And I had to keep my cool because I'm in the middle of a restaurant in Encino, but I wanted to rake the table with my claws. I was so excited. Because
you've had some big named, talented superstars in a lot of the films that you've been associated with. But I've got to assume there's something a little bit different about arguably the greatest actress who's ever lived. Suddenly now is going to be in your picture.
I mean, this is it. It doesn't get any better than this.
Right.
I don't think I could ever possibly be more excited about a bit of casting news again. So yeah, it's an absolute dream to watch Meryl Streep act out scenes that you've written. It just feels like crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next one. The next question that we have up comes to us from Stang6, who writes, Hi, John. Question for Miss Cody. Did Meryl Streep actually play the guitar in any of the scenes? Thanks.
Meryl Streep plays guitar in all of the scenes.
I thought she's either playing this or she's faking it so good.
No, she learned to play for the movie, and she started learning months in advance, and she played constantly, and she worked really diligently at it, and she did it. And all the music you hear in the film is actually recorded live. Nothing was
really.
There's
a little Les Mis there.
Exactly. There's no playback, no re-recording. And she did all the singing and guitar playing that you hear right there.
So there's a scene in the film. I'm not going to give any spoilers here. There's a scene in the film where the three of them they've just partaken of some stuff in the kitchen, and they're laying around in the room, and she's playing a song and singing. That was all recorded live?
Yeah.
That makes me sick to my. I've played guitar for like 15 years. I've never played the guitar that well, and she just picked it up a few months before the movie.
It's true. There is nothing she can't do.
That's amazing.
And I have to say I wasn't surprised, because I've never seen Meryl Streep attempt something and fail, but she pulled it off again.
It's crazy. I never even knew she could sing until I saw her in Into the Woods. And then she sang in Into the Woods, and I've had a lot of people tell me, "Oh, you didn't know she could sing from the." I just never did.
Yeah.
And then she was in the woods, and I was completely blown away. And then hearing her come into this, which is such a different sound, it's that gritty rock sound, and she pulled that off so crazy good. Were you ever worried about that? Like when you're getting Meryl Streep, and you're thinking, "Well, there's going to be performance in this." Were you ever worried about that?
I mean, she's the last person one worries about.
Good point.
But I know
Yes.
I know what you mean, though. And I had heard her in Mamma Mia, which is this Broadway style singing, and I'd heard her sing Sondheim. I didn't know if she was going to bring that same kind of precious Broadway quality to this, or if it was going to be more raw and edgy. And it turned out to be the latter. And I thought it was just really cool.
It was perfect.
Yeah.
It sounded perfect. All right, let's go to the next one. And the next question comes from JD Cusick, who writes, "What's the best advice you would have for an upcoming screenwriter?"
Here's what I would say.
Somebody with an Academy Award on your mantle.
Well, I need advice as well. I don't always make the best decisions, but I think that if I could give advice to anybody, it would be, we're fortunate enough, young people, up and coming people are fortunate enough to be living in a time where they can make things and put them out there with relative ease. Like, you suddenly have all these channels, and you don't have to wait for someone to give you permission to write stuff and make stuff. Like, you can do it now.
Yeah, make your own opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, there's this movie Tangerine that was just completely shot on an iPhone. So, like, get out there and show us what you can do.
Awesome. Okay, let's take one more from the Twitter sphere. And this one comes from Muka, who writes, "Should she write a Marvel film? Would you write a Marvel film if offered? By the way, you should be writing Spider-Man." Have you ever thought about that? That would be a totally different type of genre for you. Have you ever thought about stuff like that?
I have thought about it, and I would love to do something like that, and I very much appreciate that. But I don't know. I'm worried that if I wrote a movie about Spider-Man, it would be about like Spider-Man's like dysfunctional relationship with his father. I don't know how much like web slinging would be going on.
Right.
Because I'm so much more interested in just like weird, intimate human drama. So.
And the weird, intimate human drama is the engine that makes Ricki and the Flash hum. I mean, it's so thick and uncomfortable at times, which is like so glorious. You've started wearing different hats. I mean, it's not just movies, it's television, it's not just writing, it's producing now. As you have been expanding yourself more and more in all these different creative areas, what are you finding really presents the most challenge to you now? Is it the writing, the producing, dabbling in television, dabbling in film? Like, which is the part that you find most challenging?
The hardest part for me is just getting back to a really simple place where I can sit down and write a spec script.
Right.
Where I can just sit down and think of a new idea and write it without any expectations, and just do it freely and for myself. Because now all the things that I do are kind of tied to various obligations.
Right.
And my job has become very deadline based, and I'm working with a lot of people, and I'm collaborating, and I have to be diplomatic. And I started out just alone writing, and getting back to that is what I want to do.
Well, listen, Ricki and the Flash opens in theaters everywhere on August 7th. I saw it. I enjoyed it deeply. It is just so great seeing characters like and performers like Meryl Streep, Kevin Kline, who I have idolized since A Fish Called Wanda. I mean, I've just been, like, I totally worship that dude. Congratulations on the film, and thank you so much. It's been an honor having you here.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be here, so thanks.